Joining me in our Washington studio is Arthur Dong, professor at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business here in Washington. He also provides strategic advice to American and local firms operating in China. Professor, welcome to our program.
Pleasure to be here.
What is your biggest takeaway from President Trump's State of the Union address? This was supposed to be a unifying message. Was it? Did the president, in fact, deliver?
Well, certainly he tried to offer conciliatory messages and certainly trying to offer an olive branch in a sense to Democrats sitting in the audience. But he really focused on the politics of wedge politics, shall we say, those sort of issues that have a tendency to divide the American populace.
Let me move on to foreign policy, specifically China. He vowed to end what he called China's theft of American jobs, said China must end unfair trade practices. I mean, the kind of things we have heard over and over again from this president, certainly not surprising. But what I thought was surprising, the level he took it to during the State of the Union address, considering these two countries are in the middle of very, very sensitive negotiations to end their trade war.
Yes, we're entering the most critical phase of this trade negotiation. Robert Lighthizer, as well as Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, are heading to China next week for what is the third round of high-level talks to try to resolve this ongoing trade debate. And it seems like President Trump was making some commentary, at least offering some thoughts, that he was hopeful that there would be resolution by the March 1st deadline.
Do you think his tough language, though, China is stealing American jobs, China's theft of intellectual property, do you believe it could have any kind of negative implications on these trade talks?
Certainly, it could be, in a sense, viewed as sort of, touching on some broad topics related to the sensitivity of this topic. But I think the statements that were made at the State of the Union were more presented towards his base.
He also said any trade deal with China must include structural changes, Professor. I mean, how realistic is that China is going to make structural changes the foundation of their economy?
Yeah, I think those are going to be the most contentious and difficult issues to overcome. I mean, it's easy for China to increase purchases of American services and goods. And certainly, even with regard to this question of intellectual property rights, China is, I think, trying to find a way to resolve some of these issues as well. But asking for structural changes, in other words, sort of the abandonment of the state-owned sector in China, would be, in my opinion, a bridge too far.
And then there's one other point he brings up repeatedly, and maybe you can tell me if this is truth or false, if you will, the statement. He says our Treasury is receiving billions of dollars a month from a country, meaning China, that never gave us a dime. Is this accurate? Aren't the duties paid, in fact, by U.S. importers and costs in many cases passed on to U.S. consumers?
Yeah, this is a completely misleading statement. Because the actual, yes, the assertion that the U.S. Treasury has gone up as a result of the imposition of tariffs in terms of our tariff revenues have gone up, but who's paying for that? Ultimately, it's the U.S. consumer who at stores like Walmart or Best Buy are paying, higher prices for imported Chinese product, and it's ultimately the consumer who has been paying and is going to pay for these tariffs.
All right, we'll leave it there. Professor Arthur Dong, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.